Something historic has begun, and most people still haven't noticed. Since January 2026, a new international financial system has already been put into operation. It allows countries to conduct international trade without using a single US dollar, $0. This is not theory, not a future promise, and not a proposal under discussion. It is happening now, quietly, outside the spotlight. And once you understand what this truly means, you realize that the financial world may be entering its biggest transition since the Bretton Woods Agreement, which shaped the global monetary order after World War II. The BRICS alliance, formed by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, now expanded with new members such as Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and other strategic nations, has officially launched an international monetary settlement system known as the Unite. Unlike symbolic initiatives of the past, this system is already operational. It allows member countries to conduct cross-border trade without relying on Western-dominated financial infrastructure and, most importantly, without depending on the US dollar as the mandatory intermediary currency. We're talking about a bloc that represents nearly half of the world's population and more than $28 trillion in combined economic output. These are economies with complete supply chains in energy, food production, mining, heavy industry, technology, and strategic infrastructure. This is not a small group testing an experimental alternative. It is a coalition of nations with real weight in the global economy, creating a parallel structure that functions alongside the traditional system. To understand the depth of this shift, it is essential to grasp what the unit truly is and what it is not. The unit is not a speculative cryptocurrency, not a volatile token driven by emotional market swings, and not dependent on technological hype. It is a structured settlement system designed for stability, predictability, and monetary sovereignty. Its architecture combines two central pillars. 40% of its value is directly backed by physical gold stored in real reserves. The remaining 60% is linked to a weighted basket of member currencies, including the Chinese yuan, the Indian rupee, the Russian ruble, the Brazilian real, and the South African rand. The gold component is decisive. Since 1971, when the United States ended the dollar's convertibility into gold, the international financial system has operated primarily on trust and U.S. sovereign debt. The dollar became the world's primary reserve currency, supported by America's economic strength, the depth of its financial markets, and its geopolitical influence. The unit introduces a different approach. It combines real economic production with partial physical backing, creating a tangible anchor within its framework. What truly accelerated this movement, however, was an event that reshaped global risk perception. In 2022, more than $300 billion in Russia's international reserves were frozen by Western governments following the outbreak of the conflict in Ukraine. For decades, those reserves had been accumulated under the assumption that they were secure within the international financial system. Overnight, they became inaccessible. This episode exposed something many countries preferred to ignore. The global financial system can be used as a geopolitical pressure tool. From that moment forward, several nations began reassessing the safety of their own reserves. If assets can be frozen due to political decisions, dependence on a single system represents a significant strategic risk. China, which holds trillions of dollars in US-denominated assets, closely observed this development. Amid rising tensions surrounding Taiwan, the mere possibility of asset freezes began to be viewed as a relevant vulnerability. Within this context, the unit emerges as a financial contingency structure. It does not represent an abrupt rupture with the current system, but rather a gradual and strategic alternative. Instead of abandoning global trade entirely or triggering internal economic collapse, countries can progressively reduce their exposure to the dollar by diversifying reserves and settlement channels. In practice, this process had already been tested bilaterally. Russia and China shifted much of their trade to local currencies. India purchased Russian energy using rupees. Brazil expanded certain trade agreements using national currencies. What once seemed unlikely became routine. Now, this logic is being institutionalized at the bloc level through a coordinated mechanism. When this model expands from bilateral agreements to the entire enlarged BRICS bloc, the scale changes dramatically. We are talking about trade flows totaling trillions of dollars annually. Even if only a portion of that volume shifts away from dollar-based settlement, the cumulative effect over time could be substantial. One frequently underestimated aspect is the structural role of gold within this framework. If 40% of the unit is backed by physical gold and the volume of trade settled through the system grows, then gold reserves must grow proportionally to maintain balance. This creates continuous and functional demand for gold, not driven purely by speculation or fear, but by operational necessity. The greater the trade volume, the greater the need for backing. For the United States, this represents a strategic challenge. The dollar's status as the world's primary reserve currency allows the country to finance persistent trade deficits at lower cost, issue debt in its own currency, and exercise influence through financial sanctions. If part of global trade moves outside dollar-dominated infrastructure, the effectiveness of these tools may gradually diminish. This does not imply a sudden collapse of the US dollar. The dollar remains the most liquid and widely accepted currency in the world. What is unfolding is a gradual transition toward a multipolar system in which multiple currencies and settlement mechanisms coexist. Instead of a single central pillar, the global system begins to develop multiple centers of gravity. For developing nations, this shift offers something rare: choice. Historically, many of these countries face the so-called Triffin dilemma, needing to accumulate dollars to participate in global trade. To obtain dollars, they must export more or incur debt. When their local currencies depreciate, the burden of external debt increases. An alternative system reduces this dependency and expands strategic flexibility. Of course, challenges remain. BRICS includes countries with distinct political systems, differing strategic interests, and in some cases, historical rivalries. Maintaining coordination among these economies requires ongoing alignment. However, there is a powerful shared incentive, reducing vulnerabilities associated with exclusive dependence on the Western financial system. What we are witnessing can be described as the beginning of the end of global monetary monopoly. It is not a dramatic rupture, but a silent reconfiguration. The financial architecture built after World War II is being adjusted to reflect a more fragmented distribution of power. For investors, the implications are significant. Gold tends to gain structural importance as a strategic asset within a multipolar system. Silver may benefit as a complementary metal, given its smaller market capitalization. Diversification across currencies and real assets shifts from mere prudence to defensive strategy. None of this is happening in isolation. The unit is already operational. Companies are using it for trade settlement. Central banks are adjusting reserves. As usage increases, confidence grows alongside it, strengthening the network effect and enhancing the mechanism's legitimacy. The global financial order is changing before our eyes. The dollar does not disappear, but it ceases to be the sole structural axis of the system. The world is moving toward a more multipolar configuration, with multiple settlement routes and distinct monetary power centers. Understanding this transformation is not optional. It is a matter of strategic preparation to protect purchasing power, wealth, and opportunities in a rapidly evolving international landscape.